And Betsy, you've probably seen, we've been playing it all morning, Donald Trump first slamming Ted Cruz on his delegate strategy, and then his delegate manager, Paul Manafort, calling the tactics that the Cruz camp is using Gestapo tactics. I mean, those are very, very harsh words. The idea of using the Nazis as a way to talk about the other team's tactics is pretty harsh. What do you make of those comments?
Yeah, it's a little bit much. I mean, given that the Gestapo was the official state secret police of Nazi Germany, I don't know, it's certainly a fascinating comparison. The other thing that strikes me about the fact that Manafort would go as far as to suggest that Ted Cruz is a literal Nazi is that as of now, we aren't really seeing evidence that the Cruz campaign has done anything untoward or against the rules when it comes to reaching out to these delegates. And the reality is that Trump has made a central part of his persona the fact that he can capitalize on systems that he says are corrupt. He talks all the time about how he gave money to Democratic politicians, to liberal causes, because he was trying to work these corrupt systems. But now that he's making the case that the way the Republican delegates get allotted is corrupt, all of a sudden corruption is a huge problem and it needs to be completely thrown out. So it's just sort of interesting watching how differently he talks about these systems depending on how well they work out for him.
Yeah, and Eli, our Major Garrett today, he was talking to us about this, and he talked about the irony of someone from the Trump camp talking about Nazis when Donald Trump is the one who retweeted a tweet from Benito Mussolini, the fascist dictator of Italy during World War II. He's called for doing things that are worse than waterboarding. He's had a very contentious relationship with the press. There's a bit of irony in his campaign saying that the other side is using Gestapo tactics.
A lot of irony. And, you know, there's more irony in the fact that this is a guy complaining that the process isn't fair. Same guy who's gotten about $2 billion worth of free media so far in this election. So saying that the playing field is not level is sort of like, you know, obviously the playing field is not level. What Donald Trump is basically complaining about here is the fact that he still hasn't figured out how this game is played. It's not Gestapo tactics to, you know, to hire staffers in states like Colorado, to send them out to organize slates, to pass out cards to delegates at conventions saying, here are the people to vote for, and actually get the names and numbers aligned with them correct, unlike Trump's campaign. That's not Gestapo tactics. That's campaign 101. And the Cruz people have done it. The Trump people, even after sort of recognizing that they screwed this up in Louisiana, they won the state, didn't actually go through and secure the delegates, decided not to really try harder, not to really get that done in a lot of these other states that where delegates were selected over the weekend. And so, you know, they're sitting here using this sort of language, again, Gestapo tactics, trying to incite the passions of their supporters. But, you know, if their supporters wind up upset at the end that Donald Trump seemed to win more states and didn't actually wrap up this nomination, the person they should be upset with is not Ted Cruz. It should be Donald Trump and his campaign for failing to understand how this game and how this nomination process actually works.
Yeah, Betsy, what do you make of that? There's been a lot of criticism of Trump's ground game, the fact that he hasn't hired the same number of staffers, for example, as Ted Cruz, but also Hillary Clinton, bringing in Paul Manafort, and something very interesting, we haven't talked about this, that he didn't make an appearance on a Sunday political show this Sunday where he has for the last several weeks, if not the last several months. So is there something happening in the Trump camp that maybe some of the wheels are starting to fall off here?
It seems like they've hit a pretty rough patch. Remains to be seen how long they'll be stuck in this rough patch. But yeah, of course, things aren't going great. And of course, I think part of the problem with the perception, factual or infactual, that the Trump team is really struggling right now, part of the problem with that is that one of the central tenets of his pitch that he'd be a good president is that he's great at hiring people. He talks about this all the time. His healthcare plan in his new book, Crippled America, is basically that he's going to put the best healthcare experts in a room and make them figure it out. He says over and over on this stuff that people should trust him because he's good at hiring staff. However, looking at all these recent states having conventions where we just see example after example of Trump staff incompetence, it kind of undermines a central element of his campaign. And that's a big problem for him. Of course, the Manafort hire is really interesting, and one thing I've heard from several Republican operatives in D.C. is that, look, if Manafort is so good at his job, if he's doing such a great job sort of figuring out how to be the puppet master for the convention, how come he was doing the Sunday shows this past weekend instead of being where these conventions are actually happening, right? Instead of being on the ground, courting delegates, doing the behind-the-scenes dirty work that the Cruz campaign has been so good at. So there's the confidence level, I think, that the Trump campaign is going to be competent enough to really effectively get through a contested convention has gone down.
All right, Betsy Woodruff and Eli Stokols, thank you so much for your time.
Sure thing.
Thank you.